Hey, good morning, everybody. As you mentioned, my name is Cory Dukes. I'm going to talk a little bit about myself today. I normally don't, so it's going to be a bit of a shift from the normal speeches I do. I usually talk about students and the wants and needs that they have. We'll get into that a little bit, but I do want to kind of give a bit of a background for myself to kind of explain why I was considered an underdog at the time and how that's kind of helped move my career forward, how I've used creative solutions to help out the people that I work for, and the reasons why I wanted to do it. You know, I was born in a small town, small suburb that's west of Tokyo. Sounds like it's a really great thing to have, right? Sounds glamorous. It's the land of the rising sun. There's soccer petals raining down from the trees every day. We got great mountainous landscape, amazing food, fantastic architecture. You think there's robots flying about the place. And every single high school freshman with an underdog story ends up with guts, hard work, and determination and turns into this. I'm sure some of you might have seen this, but if you haven't, we've got Naruto and Deku. Turns out that's not really the case. In the 80s, being this amongst these guys isn't really the greatest thing to be. His kennel was pretty homogenous. I barked the same language as everybody. I ate the same kibble, but I wasn't really allowed to go into the same parks and play in a dog park with everybody else. These were the signs that I usually got met with. Not pretty great, huh? This was the first hurdle I came across in my life, and that was the first time that I came to the realization that having skin like mine, be it a little bit fair because I am a mixed kid, might not be the greatest attribute to be born with. I struggled a bit. I attended an English-speaking school. I attended a Japanese-speaking society, and I went home to a house that was half and half. Wait, I just lost my notes there. Went home to a house that was half and half with a family I don't really think was convinced having me was a good idea. I had a lot of family around the world, so when I could, we would leave a lot from Japan. I had some in Switzerland, some in Holland, and some right here in the United States where my brother was. So I spent a lot of time away, and that sounds like it's a great thing, right? Jet setting around the world. But nope, I just had a Teddy Ruxpin, a Ninja Turtle backpack, and a Game Boy. The problem was being absent a lot of the time, half homeschooled and the weird-looking kid, didn't really give me the opportunity to make or keep a lot of friends. So I didn't get invited to any of those sleepovers that you guys reminisce about when you were a kid. I didn't have play dates. When I did have a birthday, nobody came to my birthday parties. And to this day, if you ask my wife, I still don't like having birthday parties because in the back of my mind, I feel like nobody's going to show up. I'm pretty sure I'm going to get disappointed and nobody's ever going to be there, so I just prefer not to have them. To me, being a loner was my birthright, you know, so I turned to comic books, fantasy novels, manga and anime, like you saw a little bit earlier, because all of them were different. They basically stayed at home, they didn't interact with everybody else, and those disadvantaged stray wolves and loners became folklore by becoming exemplary, not letting the rejection get to them, and not letting anything get them down. When you get free of that kennel, you show them how great you are. You show them how good you can be, and you make them accept you. And I was determined at the time to be great. Now, in the 90s, I did permanently move to the States right here in Chicago to the South Side from Japan. It's a big culture shock. You know, I came from a place where we ate deep fried squid and takoyaki to having deep dish pizza. I thought it was a big change for sure, but culturally, I was still somewhere else. Even though I looked a little bit similar to my surroundings. I still watched a lot of different TV than other people. I liked different food. I enjoyed different cars than people around me liked. So the stuff I was into didn't really get along with everybody else. I read comic books. I liked baseball instead of football and basketball, and everything was different. It was a huge adjustment period for me. I still didn't really have a lot of friends, even though, like I said, I looked a little bit similar to my surroundings at this time. I still felt different. What do I do? How do I fit in? How do I impress my peers? I heard a story when I was in the cafeteria one day where they were talking about martial arts, and I figured, hey, I took martial arts since I was 6. Maybe I could go over and introduce myself to the guys and talk to them about it a little bit. I told them I still practice, and I was pretty good at it. I still attend a school up north. Maybe guys would want to come learn with me. They responded by saying, get the hell out of here, you weirdo. They didn't like the way that I talked. I said, I apologize, but I just moved to the States. I still had a bit of an accent. Between now and then, I worked really hard to get rid of it because I felt uncomfortable sounding different than everybody else. Now we can insert my first schoolyard fight, my first schoolyard victory, and the first of many rejections that I would come across being different and being an underdog. Life's not really going to be that easy, is it? Now, in 96, I started high school. It was my freshman year, and this time I was determined I'd finally fit in. New school, new people, this is it. Nope, turns out I was wrong there too. The issues with my parents really started to kind of blossom a little bit when I was in high school. My older brother, who's much bigger than me, star football player, homecoming king, the whole nine, he was a little bit distant, so I didn't have him at home to turn to. I didn't have the friends to turn to. I didn't have parents to turn to. He was much more popular than me. And I was just a nerd that was into skateboarding and writing comic books and writing stories. I used to write a lot of science fiction. I used to do a lot of fan fiction. I had a lot of ideas about what I wanted to go, and listening to hip hop instead of rap, alternative instead of, mostly R&B, and rock and roll instead of the gangster music that everybody else listened to didn't really go over so well. So I didn't tag along to any of the parties that he attended, none of the events. I didn't go to the games. I didn't get invited to anything again. And popularity, I figured out, just wasn't going to be in college for me. So figured I'd wait till college. Now, the story behind this slide, I kind of had the idea of thinking about it as an underdog, and this is basically a slide to show what I learned from my front yard behind the fence. My family was pretty middle class. My dad had a degree in engineering, and he worked in finance. He's always made a really good living. My mom had a degree in healthcare management. She owned a chiropractic office. So when we were younger, we had a nice house on the south side in the Hyde Park area. Hyde Park's a decent neighborhood, so those of you in the chats from Chicago or know the area, you'll know the neighborhood is pretty good. However, if you know anything about the south side, everything around Hyde Park is not. If you go to the south of Hyde Park or west, it's generally not such a great area to be in, and I had to travel through there to get to school. So what I saw from my front yard, behind that fence in Hyde Park, made me kind of question a lot of things. It didn't really add up. Why did everybody that looked similar to me live in such a segregated city? Why do the areas with people of color get so little? There aren't many grocery stores over here, not a lot of banks. There's a whole lot of police cars, a whole lot of liquor stores and currency exchanges, but a lot of apartments and not a lot of home ownership. That tax revenue invested in the community wasn't as big as it was everywhere else. And I just didn't understand that. It certainly wasn't like Hyde Park, and it's certainly not like Japan and a far cry from downtown and the north side of the city. What gives? Needless to say, what I saw from behind my fence in Hyde Park, looking out into the rest of the yard, not protected by that zip code, was what I would later discover was redlining. Purpose-driven subjugation for people that were not allowed to buy houses. There were no banks to provide savings or mortgages or loans to build equity or credit in the neighborhoods where people could not get the purchasing power that they needed. There was no stepping stone, no starting point, and no hope. Public schools, the resources are based on tax revenue. Now, this tax revenue is dictated by area, so no one over here owns anything. What tax revenue is being put back into the communities over here? Who's going to give them the opportunity to start anything? I had my answer. Who I was going to be at that high school age, I wanted to become that high school superhero who was an overachiever. Now, how can I figure out a way to become the Southside Hokage? I wanted to have an opportunity to give back. Now I had a goal. Now it's time to start moving forward. When college began, I had a choice. I looked into all the majors that would allow me to become the most successful, the quickest. What I thought to myself is no dream chasing here, no messing about. I got a goal, I got to get there. And at the time, I looked at what would be the most accepted to law school, and I went for it. That major was English. I focused in ethics, I wrote a lot, and I didn't want to be completely bored, so I threw in film and cinematography for myself. I took a lot of writing classes, I took a lot of film and editing classes in order to give myself a little bit of reprieve from the ridiculous amount of work I had to do as an English and ethics major. Always wanted to write, like I said, so I thought maybe one day when I get past doing everything I wanted to for everybody else, I'd get the opportunity to start writing some sci-fi TV shows, maybe some fantasy TV shows down the road. This time I did get a little bit more popular. You know, my freshman year, I was about 5'5", and I came back once during the summer and I was 5 inches taller. It was a bit of a growth spurt and it shocked my family. Seeing them was okay, but I never really felt comfortable. I didn't like being at home. And when I went away to college, my mother and father had most of their problems at the time, and this is when they started a divorce. That was the only time that I have been home during undergrad, and I've never been home since. The next step, I graduated. I got through all of the hard work that I had to, and I finished school. Step one's complete. Now, the next step is law school. I'll be the champion of the people in the next couple of years, I'm sure of it. But how do I pay for all this? I'm sure all of you guys have had that same question. We went to school, how the hell do we cover this when we're done? So I got great grades. I've always had pretty good test scores. I got into all of the schools that I wanted to. And my parents are pretty well off, but I don't really like them very much. And because of the nature on how I actually entered this world, not going into the nitty-gritty details of that, but they didn't really like me very much just because of where I came from. So they divorced, sold everything, sold the house, and I knew they weren't going to help me pay for it. Now, my dad does have a small apartment in the city at the time, and I stayed with him for a month when I got back to the city from university. And I asked him, look, I only have 3 years before I graduate from law school. Can I stay here until I'm done? I finished high school early. I finished undergrad early. I got this. You know you'll never have to deal with me again after I'm finished. You know that I'll get done with this as soon as I say I will. I'm not asking you to help me pay for school, just a place to stay when I finish. Now, remember that month I just mentioned earlier, right? That's how long it took him to leave the month-to-month lease that we had on this place and move in with the side piece that he was dating that I'm pretty sure caused the divorce between me and my mom. My mom wants nothing to do with me because, again, at the time, she wasn't really comfortable on why I was here. And my father's mental abuse kind of kicked into gear. And since I wasn't really there for anybody, she didn't want me there. My brother was currently in the military, deployed. This is around the time right after 9/11. So my brother did 2.5 tours in the Middle East. So I couldn't go stay with him because my dad decided that this new lady was more important than the rest of his family. I ended up homeless. I didn't have anywhere to go. For 3 months, I slept in my car. I put all the stuff in the back of my Mitsubishi Eclipse, and I showered in the gym. I ate at the cafeteria, and I took at side jobs just to try to take care of myself while I was in school. I landed a job in retail that allowed me to afford a decent place when combined with several of my side hustles. I found a one-bedroom apartment for $550 a month. Sounds amazing. That really doesn't exist anymore in Chicago. I'm glad that didn't happen right now because I probably would have still been sleeping in my car. I struggled, but I did push forward to do the best that I could. Now, the next part of my life was pretty much felt like obedience school. This is when law school was going on. I had a hard time during those years. I was always broke. I wasn't used to that level of struggle. You know, like I mentioned before, my family was doing okay when I was a kid, so I didn't know what that was like. I never wanted to feel that feeling again, and what ended up happening is I lost track of my earlier ideological goals. I was no longer thinking of how to help the people in the community that rejected me. I forgot about my village, and I just started to look out for myself. Uh, just didn't want to feel like I was broke again. You know, I didn't want to go through that same struggle I had for those 3 months when I was homeless. Uh, it didn't feel good for that time, or when I was in law school for 3 years, really having to push to take care of myself and watch out for numero uno. So I switched my focus from what I should have done to corporate law. This is where the money was, to be honest with you. An average income in the hundreds of thousands straight out of school, especially where I went to law school. I mean, you had recruiters that would come to us. They'd give us company cars to drive the interviews. They'd give us suits. They would say, just wear this to your interview. Don't worry about it. You know, we'll bring you in. They said, we'll take you out to eat. We'll give you a company card so you don't have to spend your own money to pay for your food, to pay for your gas, to pay for anything else that you're doing. You can focus on just taking care of the company. And for my life, I did that for 6 whole months. I got the hell out of there pretty quickly. I didn't like it. I realized it wasn't for me. And it just being told how to dress, how to act, being prepped on what to say, groomed and directed in any way that they could think of on how I should feel and how I should treat the company just felt so unnatural. You know, corporate America, nobody really cares who's working in the company or the patrons that use the company itself, that use the products, that buy from there. It's about how much profit that they can make for the people at the top. This isn't who I wanted to be, and I needed to get back on track. All this power, this privilege, has a responsibility that comes along with it. You know, the old saying, the puppies need you back home, and with great power comes great responsibility. So after doing this, I decided to go back to becoming the hero of the people. Now, I became fed up with corporate America, and I tried to figure out how I could use everything that I learned to give back to the people. You know, I wanted to find a way to be able to take care of the people that I move. So I recognized the mistake of my major, and I didn't go to civil rights law like I wanted to. I didn't get a chance to go into immigration law like I wanted to. I ended up in corporate. So I needed to think about what skills I have and how I can apply them to where I want to move forward. I thought to myself, you got this. What do you know? Okay, I know contracts. What helps people get ahead the quickest? From your experience? Well, for me, it was my education. Actually being able to finish school helped me succeed. And how can I combine the two? Okay, how do I work in education? I figured out a way where I could move from where I was into working in the education sector. So I said, this might be something that I can help me move people forward. I can change who gets scholarships, who is targeted for recruitment, who gets the knowledge of the funding opportunities that are available for people that go to school, that do have good grades and show big promise. How can I make this kind of impact? I need to work in the higher up administration parts of education. So that's what I did. I worked with one of my recruiters, one of the employment people at the school that I attended, for career opportunities that became available for employment in colleges. I hung up my corporate cleats and I got hired in a small 4-year school running the admissions department. Now, in admissions, I was able to kind of start turning around the focus of the recruitment efforts for the schools. I was able to start working towards bringing in more people of color, more women than they normally recruit for science and education degrees than they had before, and focusing people who did have artistic talent into the opportunity to be able to go to an art school that they might not have had before. Resources, scholarships, and career choices, quite frankly, through no fault of their own, these students had no idea existed. You know, one of the things that I can remember is the first time I took the school that I worked at to a school on the south side that they had never been before. I decided to take the school down there just for a college fair to say, hey, we're here. This is an opportunity for you to go to school. And I ended up getting the shock of all shocks. I ended up seeing just my university there, and the only other people at this college fair, mind you, for graduating seniors. Now, at this school, the graduating seniors had to have a B average in order to go to this particular college fair that day. So these are good kids, good students. You know, everybody there is studious. They're focused on their post-secondary career. And the only people at that college fair were the community colleges in the city and the United States Army. Those are the only two resources that showed up for these kids to go. Now, I'm not saying a four-year institution is the only route that you can go to be successful, but damn, you got to at least give people a choice, right? Give them the opportunity to say, look at what else is out there. I mean, if we just take creative fields, the creative degree fields, how many of you guys in the chats attended art school? You know, how many people in the room attended art school? Now, how many of you found out about art school while you were in school or during a college tour? You know, a lot of us get informed about the career fields that you can go into when you are younger. Now, imagine you went to a school in a land that people forgot about. Only people that talked to you about this post-secondary was to mention community college or the military. Now, if we pile on top of that underprivileged communities, over-policed areas, under recognition due to the color of your coat, redlining, over incarceration, and over incarceration of members of your pack, and you have by far and away the perfect storm, creating underdogs over and over again. We are all becoming increasingly more aware of systemic racism, but are you guys aware how bad it actually is? Now, I worked in post-secondary education for 15 years for 3 different schools. I ran admissions departments and focused recruitment efforts for those young kids we talked about. After a while, I did move to the organization that I'm with now. And the Alternative Schools Network, we work towards creating education and employment programs for youth and young adults to re-enroll in school and finish their high school diploma so that they can successfully transition to college, training, or employment. Now, this is a nonprofit. The kids that do attend our schools do not have to pay for anything. So when they come to school, they're not paying for their degree or returning to school or finishing their credits. We reach out to high school dropouts between the ages of 16 and 21 so that they can come back to school to finish their diploma. We think it's really important because of a number of factors. One is that we all know the benefits of having at least a high school diploma rather than not having one. And we also know the impact that has on the community. If people are actually able to go to school and finish their degree, they're far less likely to be involved in anything that they don't need to be involved in, and they're far more likely to become successful adults as they move forward. Also, studies show that when you're working your earlier teen years, the more you're going to work as you become an adult, because you learn the skills and the skill set to be successful and showing up and work on time, learning how to apply for jobs, speak to employers, the whole nine. I mean, it's just important. And in the years that I've worked with this organization, we've done a lot of reports with several institutions. Johns Hopkins has done reports with us, the Northeastern University in Boston, and the University of Illinois here in Chicago. We've done reports, and I just want to know if anybody has a guess in their head about what do you think the unemployment numbers are for Black youth just in Chicago in percentages from 16 to 21. I think one of my students might be in the chat. That's pretty funny. 35%. Good guess. Not quite. It's even worse than that, as we'll see when we get to the slides here. So young people nationwide, 16 to 24, lag far behind. Overall, the economy and the levels of employment is just pretty bad. So what you see in this chart here, read through this if you guys get a chance to later on, but this is the part that I want to have you recognize. Black kids are about 5 times more likely to be out of school and unemployed than the whites nationwide. And it's actually 45% of youth and young adults in Chicago that are unemployed and out of school. This means that they don't have a degree and they're unemployed. So if you think about that, it's incredibly staggering. That's about 1 out of 2 in a margin of error when you're talking about statistics of young black kids that are not in school and do not have a job. It's staggering, isn't it? There's a huge number of issues that lead to this being the case, but the career I've had for the most part of my life is to try to be the champion for these underdogs. What I saw, and I saw what life could be when you get forgotten about. During that time when I myself was homeless, I could have been a different person. You know, I felt desperation. I know what comes from being hungry and not at least having a bone to chew on at night. It's tough. And like I said, my life could have gone down a very different path. And the organization that I work with now is currently running several unemployment and employment programs in the summer for youth. And even during this pandemic, our organization is currently employing over 700 youth and young adults here in Chicago through the programs that we were working with. I came to the realization that I've worked for, like I said, over a decade in some way, shape, or form with and for underprivileged youth, trying my best to move forward and learn about career opportunities and find their inner motivation and turn their lives around. I've had many failures, sure, but I've also had a lot of success. And I use my creative ideas and creative thought process to come up with creative solutions that I observed in the communities that I called home. I felt like an underdog for most of my life. And since I was born, I always thought that I needed to figure out a way to succeed. You guys are creative and you can think outside of the box, but one of the biggest things you need to do is figure out how you can apply that to help out others as well. I'm sure a lot of you have thought about how you feel like an underdog sometimes, especially now with how things are going and how bad it may feel. But what is the whole point of an underdog story? It's the triumphant bit at the end. It's about how we succeed, how we become that champion, how we do it to improve ourselves and the lives around us. The big thing that you want to be able to do is think about what you can do to help out. Now, during the Q&A, I want to mention a little bit about what we do and how you guys can help if you wish to. And outside of if you don't have the means monetarily to help out, how you can volunteer. If you come from an organization that is in the creative field already and you have maybe internships that are open, maybe think about extending it out to some areas that you may not have thought of. If you look at, let's say, just the creative fields like I mentioned before, how many Ta-Nehisi Coates do you think we missed out on by not going to these recruitment opportunities on the South Side? How many scientists, engineers, how many artists get passed over because the only people that show up at their schools are the military and the community colleges? Thank you guys. I appreciate you.